Imagine giant robotic tripods vaporizing New Jersey Democrats. Sounds like a sci-fi movie, right? Well, in today's crazy political climate, some folks are joking that the real danger isn't aliens, but the radical ideas and fiery debates tearing apart the Democratic Party. So, what if I told you that behind the headlines about AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the woke revolution, there's a deeper story about power, identity, and the future of America? Stick around, because what's happening now might just blow your mind. All right, buckle up, folks, because the headlines lately have been stranger than fiction. You've probably come across some pretty wild claims, like giant robotic tripods suddenly popping up across New Jersey, vaporizing Democrats in a blaze of death lasers. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Is this a new blockbuster sci-fi movie? But nope, this isn't Hollywood. It's a bizarre way some people are describing the chaos unfolding in our real-world politics. Imagine towering alien machines with glowing eyes and death rays, targeting specific communities, disproportionately affecting low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. It sounds straight out of a science fiction nightmare, right? But in the wild corners of the internet and even some heated political debates, folks are joking, half-joking maybe, about extraterrestrial invasions as a metaphor for the chaos, division, and perceived destruction happening in American politics today. And just when you think it can't get any stranger, check this out. AOC, the queen of progressive social media, recently tweeted, "Stop demonizing the Martian X community." Yep, she's using humor to call out the absurdity, but it's revealing. Apparently, even aliens aren't safe from the woke crossfire. The idea that extraterrestrial beings are being dragged into the culture wars, well, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. But it highlights one thing. The discourse has become so surreal, so over the top, that even science fiction is bleeding into our political reality. It's absurd, right? But it's also a sign of how bizarre and disconnected some conversations have become, where the line between satire and reality blurs, and everyone's just trying to make sense of the madness. Now, let's take a moment to talk about words, because in politics, words aren't just words. They carry meaning, power, and sometimes a lot of confusion. You've probably heard equity and equality tossed around a lot lately. But here's the thing. These two concepts, while related, are fundamentally different. Equality is straightforward. Think of it like this. Imagine a group of people trying to watch a baseball game over a fence. Equality means giving everyone the same size box to stand on, so everyone has an equal chance to see over the fence. It's about fairness in opportunity. The starting line is the same for everyone, but equity is different. It recognizes that not everyone starts from the same place. So instead of giving everyone the same sized box, you give taller people a smaller box and shorter people a bigger one, adjusting the playing field so everyone can actually see the game. It's about ensuring fair outcomes, not just equal opportunities. So, the big difference? Equality is about sameness, equal opportunity. Equity is about fairness, making sure everyone actually has an equal shot at success, even if that means giving some people a little extra help or adjusting the rules. Now, here's where things get tricky. Many folks on the woke left often blur these lines, using equity as a buzzword to push policies that aim for outcomes rather than opportunities. This can lead to confusion and frustration because it's not always clear whether they're talking about giving everyone the same shot or ensuring everyone ends up in the same place. This confusion can be dangerous, because when people conflate the two, saying equity just means fairness, but actually pushing for outcome-based measures, it can undermine the idea of merit, hard work, and individual responsibility. And that's where a lot of frustration and pushback come from. So, remember, words matter. Equality is giving everyone an equal start. Equity is about making sure everyone finishes the race, even if that means a different starting line or some extra help. Understanding. This difference is crucial, especially in today's heated political debates. So here's a question that's been buzzing around Democratic circles. Many are dreaming big, imagining a Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ticket for 2028. Yeah, you heard that right. The dynamic duo of the progressive left teaming up to lead the party into the next decade. It sounds exciting, right? Or maybe just maybe, it's a recipe for a political disaster. On one hand, Bernie and AOC have electrified the base. Their rallies draw huge crowds. Their social media presence is massive, and they've become symbols of the progressive movement. But here's the catch. Winning the popular vote at rallies isn't the same as winning in the general election. And that's where veteran comedian and political commentator Bill Maher steps in with a reality check. Maher recently said that ticket wouldn't outperform the Harris-Wallace one, and he's got the receipts to back it up. Why does Maher say that? Because despite the enthusiasm at rallies, despite the big crowds and social media hype, the real test of electability isn't just about energizing the base. It's about those crucial swing voters, moderates, independents, suburban voters, those who decide elections and often sit on the fence. Maher points out that Bernie and AOC, while popular among the party's progressive activists, tend to scare off moderates and conservatives. Their policies and rhetoric, sometimes seen as too radical, can alienate voters needed to win the general election. Remember, winning the Democratic nomination is one thing, but actually winning the presidency requires appealing to a broad coalition. Those who might agree with Bernie on health care or climate, but draw the line at certain policies or tone. So, Maher's point is simple. The energy and enthusiasm at rallies don't automatically translate into electoral victory. The true challenge is turning that enthusiasm into votes, especially among voters who are more moderate or independent. That's the political gamble. While a Bernie AOC ticket might energize the base, it could also risk alienating the middle, and in a close election, that difference can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Now here's where things get even more intense, because what happened at an AOC-Bernie rally in Idaho has ignited a firestorm of debate. During the event, someone dramatically threw a Palestinian flag over an American flag, and to many in the crowd, it was met with cheers. On the surface, it might seem like a simple act of political expression, people protesting or showing solidarity. But the reaction from the crowd, and more importantly, the silence from the speakers, raises some serious questions about principles, patriotism, and what it says about the movement. Bill Maher argues that if Sanders or AOC had spoken out immediately against the act, if they had made a clear statement affirming American patriotism, it could have shown some leadership, some backbone. But instead, their silence? Maher suggests that it's almost like an implicit approval, an indication that they're more comfortable with symbolic gestures than with taking a firm stand on core patriotic values. This, Maher calls a classic example of what he terms woke hypocrisy, the tendency to perform symbolic acts that look good on social media while ignoring or sidestepping the hard questions about patriotism and national loyalty. He's not mincing words. Maher criticizes performative progressivism, those who appear to stand for justice and human rights in theory, but turn a blind eye when it comes to issues of American identity and security. And Maher doesn't hold back. He openly calls out anyone who cheers for acts or symbols that he equates with terrorism or anti-American sentiment. To him, supporting or remaining silent in situations like this isn't just a political stance. It's a moral failing that undermines the core values of patriotism. His message is clear. Gestures like raising foreign flags over American ones or remaining silent when it happens can be seen as a rejection of American patriotism. Whether intentionally or not, it's a reminder that words and actions in politics matter, especially when they're so visible. So, the takeaway here is that performative acts, whether symbolic or silent, can reveal a lot about where someone really stands. Are they committed to American values, or are they more interested in performative virtue signaling? That's a question Maher believes everyone needs to ask. Let's get real. AOC isn't quite the underdog she often portrays herself to be. Bill Maher makes a sharp point. She grew up in Yorktown Heights, a pretty affluent suburb in Westchester County, New York. Not exactly the oppressed ghetto, or a neighborhood struggling with poverty and systemic hardship. Unlike the rags to riches stories some politicians lean on, AOC's background is more suburban and privileged than many realize. Yet, she's crafted a narrative of struggle, talking about her working-class roots, her fight against establishment powers to build a connection with the grassroots left. This isn't just storytelling, it's strategic. By framing herself as an underdog, she appeals to voters who feel disenfranchised, giving her a sense of authenticity and relatability. But Maher raises an important question. If a politician is willing to stretch or even bend the truth to gain political advantage, what does that say about their future leadership? Are they honest and transparent, or are they willing to manipulate facts to serve their agenda? That's the real risk. When leaders craft false or exaggerated narratives, it erodes trust. Today, it might be about personal background. Tomorrow, it could be about policy promises, national security, or economic plans. Trust is the foundation of effective leadership. If future officials are willing to blur the lines of truth for political gain now, how can the public be confident they won't do the same when making critical decisions that affect millions? Maher's warning is clear. Honesty and transparency matter. Politicians who manipulate their backgrounds or the facts risk losing credibility and ultimately the public's trust, something that's crucial in times of crises or major national challenges. So, the lesson here is simple. If someone's willing to stretch the truth for political leverage, it calls into question their integrity and their ability to lead honestly. And in politics, trust isn't just a virtue, it's essential. Let's shift our focus to Bernie Sanders, self-proclaimed democratic socialist, a vocal champion of equity, and a figure who's become synonymous with progressive politics. But here's the irony. When asked to define what he means by equity during interviews or live debates, Sanders often falls silent or offers vague answers. Crickets. It's as if he prefers to keep the term ambiguous, perhaps because once you try to pin it down, the contradictions become glaring. This isn't just semantics. Equity in Sanders's rhetoric often veers into full-blown socialism, calling for wealth redistribution, expanded government control, and economic overhaul. Yet, despite his socialist ideals, Sanders owns multiple properties and has been comfortably living in Washington for decades. That contradiction, advocating for wealth redistribution while personally benefiting from property ownership, is a common point of criticism. It highlights a paradox. Many Americans see such disparities and wonder, if these policies are so good for everyone else, why does Sanders personally benefit from the system he criticizes? It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do. And it turns many voters off who value authenticity and consistency. Meanwhile, AOC's brand of progressivism, climate extremism, open borders, aggressive identity politics, has moved from fringe ideas to the mainstream of the Democratic Party. Her bold stances now influence party platforms and sway political debates. But here's the catch. Shifting the party away from these radical ideas could mean losing her core base. AOC's supporters are deeply committed to her progressive vision, and many see her as a symbol of revolutionary change. Dialing back her rhetoric would risk alienating her followers and diminishing her influence. That's why she's unlikely to tone down her radicalism anytime soon. For her, standing firm on these issues isn't just about policy. It's about maintaining her identity, her power, and her political relevance. The contradiction between Sanders's personal wealth and his socialist rhetoric, combined with AOC's unwavering commitment to radical policies, illustrates a broader pattern. In politics, the challenge of authenticity. When leaders advocate for policies that threaten their own interests or clash with their actions, it fuels public skepticism. So, the takeaway is this: consistency matters. Voters are increasingly aware of political contradictions, and when they see leaders benefiting from the very systems they criticize, trust erodes. Meanwhile, Radical policies that shift the political landscape often stay in place because those pushing them have little incentive to dial back, especially when their base demands unwavering commitment. So let's consider a hypothetical. What if the Democratic Party actually endorses a Bernie Sanders AOC ticket in a future election? At first glance, it might seem like a bold move, but in reality, it could spell disaster for the Democrats. Not because Sanders or AOC are bad people, far from it, but because they embody a political direction that's increasingly alienating to middle America. Their policies, their rhetoric, these are seen by many as out of touch with the mainstream, practical concerns of everyday voters. This isn't just about disagreements over policy, it's about perception. Their aggressive stance on issues like defunding the police, open borders, and climate extremism, while passionately supported by their base, are viewed by many middle Americans as too radical, too idealistic, or even dangerous. Meanwhile, the Republican Party often stands for results, economic growth, patriotism, law and order, and practical solutions to everyday problems. They appeal to voters who prioritize stability, national pride, and common sense, values that resonate deeply with a large portion of the electorate. If Democrats double down on the current woke agenda, pushing identity politics, political correctness, and radical social reforms, they risk alienating a broad swath of voters who feel their concerns are being ignored or dismissed. And here's the danger. This approach might energize the Democratic base, but it could also entrench perceptions that Democrats are out of touch with middle America's values. All of this could open the door for a Republican victory, possibly even a return of Donald Trump or someone with similar populist appeal, who promises to restore pride, focus on results, and push back against what many see as overreach. But it's not just about one election. If the woke agenda continues unchecked, there's a risk of turning the U.S. into a political sci-fi nightmare where social division deepens, free speech is curtailed, and the country's core values are fundamentally challenged. History shows that when political parties drift too far from the center, becoming ideologically extreme, they often face backlash, losing touch with the silent majority. The challenge for Democrats is to appeal to their base without losing sight of the broader electorate. So, if the Democratic Party leans too heavily into the Sanders-AOC radicalism, they risk not only losing the next election, but also transforming the political landscape into a battleground that could threaten the nation's stability and unity.